Good afternoon, readers. It's Tilly here from Tilly Shelf, and welcome to another Victorian Poetry Afternoon. So today we are moving on to a poet who was a friend of Arthur Hugh Clough, who was the poet yesterday, and that is Matthew Arnold. And I'm going to be reading a poem called To Marguerite Continued, which I've read the poem a couple of times now, and I don't know why it's called To Marguerite Continued. I don't know whether there was a different part of To Marguerite that was previously written. I don't know whether Marguerite was a friend of Matthew Arnold's. There is nothing in the introduction and nothing in the little biography of Matthew Arnold in this book to explain why it's To Marguerite, but we will just have to wonder about that, I think. So I'm a little bit late coming to the recording today because I decided to do a little bit of light digging in my back garden to plant a rose bush that we were given as a wedding present that arrived today in the post. It's like a bare root rose. And I forgot that our soil in our garden is it's really heavy clay, but about like 30% of it is stones. It's like somebody built a dry stone wall and then just buried it in clay, and they're like, the average size of the stones is about like a big spread hand, but like up to the size of my head, and you just don't make any progress basically when you're digging. You're just hitting into stones. So yeah, that was a little bit, feel it in my shoulders a little bit just now. So that kept me behind on this. And it's funny because the rose is called Gabriel Oak, so, you know, points if you can remember which Victorian novel Gabriel Oak is a character from, and he's this like burly farmer guy who's really capable and good at everything, and I was just thinking about, you know, how how incompetent I was compared to Gabriel Oak when I was trying to plant his rose. But anyway, that's not the topic that we are here to talk about just now, so I am now going to read for you To Marguerite Continued. Yes, in the sea of life enisled, with echoing straits between us thrown, dotting the shoreless watery wild, we mortal millions live alone. The islands feel the enclasping flow, and then their endless bounds they know. But when the moon their hollows lights, and they are swept by balms of spring, and in their glens on starry nights the nightingales begin to sing. Nightingales divinely sing. And lovely notes from shore to shore across the sounds and channels pour. Oh, then a longing like despair is to their farthest caverns sent. For surely once they feel we were parts of a single continent. Now round us spreads the watery plain. Oh, might our marges meet again? Who ordered that their longing's fire should be as soon as kindled, cooled? Who renders vain their deep desire? A god their severance ruled, and bade betwixt their shores to be that unplumbed, salt estranging sea. So yeah, this is a poem about isolation, I suppose, and human isolation, and the feeling that we do talk about quite often nowadays of being alone in a crowd, and, you know, surrounded by many others, but also disconnected from them. Matthew Arnold puts it, we mortal millions live alone. And he likens that idea to a very nice metaphor of an archipelago of islands that were once part of, well, they suppose once part of a single continent, that have been divided by the sea, and they are close enough that nightingales singing on one island can be heard on another, but far enough that they can never be connected. And that in itself is quite a depressing image, I suppose. It's the permanency of that divide, the certainty of the fact that the sea is always between them, and he describes this as their endless bounds. And that's interesting because a bound in itself is a limit, and it's a limit that is set on the island. But the endless part is limitless, and that's going forward through time. There is never going to be a stop to this division between them. So it's not a very cheerful image, really. It's this kind of, he's conveying very strongly this certainty that we can never fully connect to other people and to the people around us, even if we have like the kindling of a connection. Their longing's fire should be as soon as kindled, cooled. that kindling of a connection is never going to last, and is never going to form a true permanent connection between the islands and between, by extension, people. So yeah, it's not an overwhelmingly optimistic poem compared to maybe the poem we had yesterday that had quite a little bit of an upbeat feel to it, I suppose. I find it interesting the way that he refers to God. He says, a god their severance ruled. It's kind of like an Old Testament-y kind of God, like a harsh, judging, dividing God, or almost like kind of a pagan God, in the way that it's not God, it's a God. It's like it could be one of many. And yeah, it makes you wonder, like, why would the god do that, and why was that their choice of how they were creating this world? And I guess that's kind of the question that Matthew Arnold is asking, is like, why do we live in a world that is like this, and reconciling that with religious ideas. I don't know, because I feel like if you do look to sort of the Christian system that was, highly favoured by the Victorians, you do have this idea that humans were made in the image of God, and then the other human, like, he made Adam and then he made Eve kind of out of Adam, so there is that connection there. And yet it's separate. The biblical story that this poem mostly reminds me of is like Babel, this idea that we once had a shared community and a connected community, and then because humans set themselves up too high, they were then brought down and separated. But there's no reference to like speech and language in this poem that would like lend to that being the story that is referenced. It's what comes to mind for me. Yeah, he's quite big on using little bits of alliteration, like the watery wild, mortal millions, and then later on the unplumbed salt estranging sea. That's a brilliant line. Just the sibilance and the use of the s's, which occurs throughout the poem, to be honest, like enclasping flow, endless bounds, swept by balms of spring. It kind of it lends to that image of the sea and the lapping of the waves of the sea against the islands. So I like the way that's done. But I find myself not really wanting to linger with this poem because it's so negative, and yeah, I don't really know. Yeah, I guess it makes me want to know a little bit more about Matthew Arnold, to know why he was so negative. And one of the things that I'm doing with this project is I'm trying to stop myself from going into it, because if you type up the name of a Victorian poem into Google, which I have been doing to get the text for them for the descriptions, you normally inevitably find like 3 or 4 essays of like, a full interpretation of such and such a poem, and I don't want to do that because I don't want to read those and just spout out something that somebody else has said. So I'm basically just sticking to what's written in here and just reading the biography and the introduction for each poem that I pick. But I feel like I want to know what was going on in his life that he felt so alone, I suppose, or felt so estranged from the people around him, or whether this was his kind of general observation of mankind, that he felt that people were all isolated and alone, or what his experience was, that was his belief. Or whether it's just a kind of poetic conceit and he just wanted to play around with the metaphor, and maybe he just wanted the excuse to describe some islands and decided to like fit in the idea of the humanity into it just to make the most of the metaphor. I don't know. Yeah. Let me know what you think. I'm going to read it again, and then tomorrow we will be reading... Oh, there's a lot of Matthew Arnold in there. This is the weird thing, like, it's an anthology that's got loads and loads and loads of people in it, but then some poets that you might hardly have heard of, there is just tons of stuff by them. Oh, that's quite a name. So tomorrow we're going to be reading poems by Adelaide Ann Proctor. That is not a poor quality name, I have to say. So, let's reread To Marguerite Continued, and then I'm going to rest my shoulders from the heavy digging work that I've just been doing. Yes, in the sea of life enisled, with echoing straits between us thrown, dotting the shoreless watery wild, we mortal millions live alone. The islands feel the enclasping flow, and then their endless bounds they know. For when the moon their hollows lights, and they are swept by balms of spring, and in their glens on starry nights the nightingales divinely sing, and lovely notes from shore to shore across the sounds and channels pour, oh, then a longing like despair is to their farthest caverns sent. For surely once, they feel, we were part of a single continent. Now round us spreads the watery plain, oh, might our marges meet again. Who ordered that their longing's fire should be, as soon as kindled, cooled? Who renders vain their deep desire? A god their severance ruled, and bade betwixt their shores to be the unplumbed, salt, estranging sea. It's another poem that's got quite a strong and commanding rhythm, and I did try and read it without depending too much on that, but I think I'm not very good at reading poetry aloud. That's a definite fact. And I find it very hard to ignore when there is a firm rhythm guiding what is said. I find it interesting that the line that allows you to bend the rhythm to itself a little bit more is, for surely once they feel we were parts of a single continent. That's split over two lines. It's that enjambment. But there's normally the end of every line is like a comma, a question mark, a dash. But that pair of lines, the phrase is joined together across the pairing, if that makes sense. The commas are in the middles of the lines instead of at the end. And I like the way that kind of unites it as a phrase and makes the divide between it a little bit more jarring, because I feel like that contributes to this sense of something that should be united, being divided and being separated in that way. So I really like that technique. Yeah, I wish I was better at reading things without it being like but yeah, I don't know. I hope you like that one. And take care. I will speak to you tomorrow. Yeah, I should say, this is definitely the most successful and popular video series that I've ever done on my channel, but probably it's one of the ones that I've enjoyed the most. I feel like I'm learning something every day, and every day I'm being introduced to quotes and phrases and poets that I hope that I'm going to remember and think of in the future. And every day I'm thinking back on the poems that we've read previously, and just in, not even when I'm sat down doing the videos, I'm reflecting on the better of the poems that we've read. And yeah, it feels like it's a really engaging process for me, even if it's not really of interest to the wider Victober reading community, who are enjoying more of like the longer novels. I haven't been able to like get involved so much with all of that, but I feel like even just doing this, I have made this Victober a bit special for myself. So yeah, I hope if you are watching that you have got something out of it so far. But yeah, thank you very much for watching, and take care.